Welcome to part 2 of Cringiest Things About Being a Jehovah's Witness. Before we start, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you're notified for more upcoming videos. Videos every Wednesday and Saturday. And, of course, starting with the doozy, one of the most cringiest things about being a Jehovah's Witness is, we've talked about this before, dressing, grooming, but specifically this time we're going to talk about haircuts. I didn't know that, or I guess I never thought much about it growing up, but as a completely preemie witness, haircuts, especially for men, I mean for both genders, yes, but specifically for men, there are so few options. It's like North Korea level of options. Like, if you have a haircut that sticks out in any way that isn't exactly what everybody else has, you will be called into the back room, you will end up talking with an elder, and you will be counseled. So, growing up, I always had the same sort of haircut. A very plain, almost like you see with this brother here. A very plain, generic haircut. Short hair, no sideburns, no amount of length, no depth, just a generic haircut. Definitely not a fade. No designs, it couldn't be too short, and it certainly couldn't get past a certain length. And I lived fine with that. I never really thought about it. But, you know, it gets really boring after a while getting the same haircut every time. And this is me as a rather light complexion male. I can't even imagine what it's like for many of our African American brothers who can't naturally do a lot of the things that their hair is meant for. Like, you know, some of the darker and heavier curls and, you know, threads and dreads and, you know, different hairstyles that many black people use, or African Americans. You know, they're not allowed to do it in the organization because they say they're worldly haircuts. And they really are not worldly haircuts. As a matter of fact, those are things that are just natural to that style of hair. And what many African American brothers end up doing is just having short hair. And once they get to a certain length, they you know, cut it right back down. So they have even less options. And sisters, their haircuts have to be nice and decent. They cannot color their hair any color that's unnatural. They can't have crazy highlights, or what they would deem as crazy or wild highlights, rather. They can't do so many things. So this whole issue with hair, I do not see where it says in the Bible to, you know, keep your hair short to a certain length or to not let it grow. I fail to see where in scripture it mentioned that. Maybe I missed that in the book of Hairstyles, chapter 1, verse 1. I guess I just skimmed over that part. But yeah, it's interesting being a witness. I didn't even know this too, but at a certain point in my life, I had, you know, let my sideburns grow because I decided, you know what, if I'm gonna die at the stake for sideburns that go down to my ear, just a little bit right there, like, if that's going to be the final nail in the coffin, let it be. Because in reality, it's such a minor detail. I know the Bible does talk something about hair, and I'm sure the organization has come out with many things about haircuts, but I've never in my life heard anything be published about sideburns. To this day, I can't think of anything. I haven't done research in a while, but I do not believe there's anything wrong with sideburns. As a preemie, I did not believe that. Well, little did I know that it was brought up to my family, to my father, and subsequently my mother, that my sideburns were something that needed to be addressed with the elders. That the elders told my father, who was an elder, that I needed to cut my sideburns down a little bit. They were a little bit worldly. Oh, those worldly sideburns. God forbid I stumble a brother. Oh no. It's funny that the only reason brothers are stumbled by sideburns or anything like that is because they've been conditioned to do so. Any quote-unquote worldly person would never, that would never even cross their mind. I could have Wolverine sideburns and it never would be a problem. But witnesses, because they're so hyper-focused, like its image is a perfect example of how they view it. They view if you do anything different, that you're hyper-focusing on yourself. instead of expressing yourself. I cannot even, sideburns for God's sakes. That's how they believe, that if you do anything out of the ordinary, or out of their ordinary, you are like trying to give yourself all this attention, when in reality, you're just being yourself. So, it's really exaggerated, and it's not biblical. It's not a principle. It's a rule. So, very cringy. I didn't even know that for years and years, until very recently, actually, that the elders were talking to my father, almost to every congregation we went to, English and Spanish, about my sideburns? What? Okay. Number one. Okay. Number two is the counseling from our supposed shepherds and leaders in the local congregations, the elders. Their shepherding was so varied. You might get an elder who was nice and loving and caring and understanding and a responsible adult, a mature person who would sit you down and read a text to you and actually explain it logically. And then you'd get some elders who were off the cuff and emotional, and they would tell you things that had no biblical basis. They would give you rules that they made up. And they'd say that it's just appropriate and just to follow it. Not an exaggeration. When I was in the Spanish congregation, I'm sorry, I'm a little sick, so. When I was in the Spanish congregation, I would handshake brothers, and some brothers, I would give them like the one hand and then a pat on the back. You know, like a kind of like a half hug. So there's this one brother in a wheelchair, and I did that to him, like that. Okay, so this one elder notices me in the Spanish congregation. This elder is known to have a big head. He takes me to the back room and brings attention to the fact that I did this half hug, half handshake. And he says, that's a worldly handshake. What I'm supposed to do is either handshake or hug, but I can't do this handshake to hug transition. That part is just crossing the line. In God's eyes, I'm as good as a adulterer for this half hug handshake. So I tell the brother, okay, you know, this is also why it took so long for them to consider me to be an elder, because I kind of just say, you know, exactly what's going on my mind. Not to be mean, but that's just how I am a lot of times. Anyways, I tell him, okay, so I could do that, but where in the Bible, where does it say to do that? Like, you gotta I need a basis. You show me a scripture. And then he said, it's not in the Bible, but it's more appropriate in Spanish. That it's more appropriate. And in my head I go, okay, but how are you basing how are you basing that off? Like, where did you get that idea? Like, someone instilled that on you. You learned that somewhere. How'd you get to this point in your life? So, I told my father that, you know, hey, this brother said to not do this. It's a worldly handshake. God forbid I stumble a brother with this worldly handshake of mine. You know, poor brother's on his wheelchair, doesn't know anything about this. My father goes to the elder and tells him, hey, don't talk to my son like that. If you do, you better back it up with the Bible. Or if you talk to him like that, you bring me with him so we can talk together. I was 16 at the time. So I was not considered to be a servant at that point. No, for 2 or 3 years after that. I believe I became a servant at 19. But yes, I was obviously, you know, a very stumbling, very troubled boy with my worldly handshakes and my long, ridiculously long sideburns that reached almost under my ear. So, very cringy. Very cringy. Number 3, the gossip culture that witnesses have is, without a doubt, one of the worst parts about being a witness. When witnesses go door to door, the facade that's presented to the people at the door is one of perhaps a little culty, perhaps a little overzealous, a little foolhardy in the religion, but in essence, people believe that witnesses are good people and that they don't have any issues like this, that they're family oriented, that they take good care of their friendships, and that they're Bible based. But the organization has such a pull and it has such a focus on this gossip culture that they actively promote it when they say that if you see a brother commit a sin, if they don't admit their sin to the elders, then you have to do it, otherwise you're blood guilty. This is part of that whole gossip thing. Remember that for gossiping in the congregation, that's what brothers and other are talking to other brothers about, like drama that's going on. Sometimes, a lot of times, something that happens in the congregation, on a congregation level, the elders will know, and the elders tell their wives, and then once they tell their wives, or once it goes past that little room in the back, the B room, it spreads to the whole congregation. Everybody knows. So, for example, in my case, everybody, I swear to God, in my whole damn circuit knows that I am not an active witness anymore. That I left for what reason or what reason. They know the things that I'm talking about, the things I that are in my headspace, for example. Not to get too specific, but things that I'm going through, they know things, the congregation. Now, I actively have zero to no communication with all witnesses, yet somehow they're finding out about personal things, and it's spreading to as far where elders ask me questions about things that I never told anybody who was a witness. So this gossip culture is insane. They actively promote you to snitch on each other. If you don't, it's almost like you are a participant to that crime. It's kind of like, harboring a criminal in your house. That's how they view it. And the crime could be the sin could be simple, little things. Things that are up to interpretation. Things like watching an R-rated movie. Things like playing a violent video game. Things like your music choices, or your dress, or your sideburns. It could be anything. Gossiping is out of this world. I was a participant to this gossip culture, because when you're a witness, you know nothing else. This is just normal, comes natural to you. I remember there was a sister one time who was renowned, let's say, for coming and going as she pleases, and being disfellowshipped and reinstated. This was her fourth time. She comes to our hall visiting because one of the elders from her halls visits and gives a talk in our hall. So she's there in the front, and I'm doing the sound in the back near the B room. And I turn to my other brother and I say, "Look who it is." It's Flip Flopper. And then he says, "Yeah." And then he says, "I guess she's reinstated." And I go, "Yeah, I guess so." He's like, "You think she's reinstated, or is she still disfellowshipped?" And I go, 50-50. It's a coin toss. So we were gossiping about her right there when she's just on the other side of the hall, because that's what witnesses do. It's part of the culture. And it's wrong, but you see it as normal. So in reality, witnesses don't have it any better, and if anything, they have it worse when it comes to the structure of friendships, how they're viewed, how your family is viewed, your morale is skewed. This is not a normal thing in the quote-unquote world, but for witnesses, they're all about it. Now, yes, there's gossip everywhere. There's gossip in the workplace, there's gossip in school, but it never goes down deep into this level where it's ingrained and actively promoted. That's completely different. It's on a whole different level as a witness. So very cringy, very, oh my gosh, just thinking about it makes me just wanna shake in my seat. Can't take it. And lastly, for this part 2 is dating, which is, I can't even, if you know, as a witness, to date is like one of the worst things in the world. The article that I got this from, which I really want to talk about as a separate point, was entitled something like, do Jehovah's Witnesses have rules on dating? Something like that. And they say, no, it's principle. No, it's Bible principle and God's standard. But in reality, yes, there are rules. Kind of goes back to that gossiping thing. So if I go out with a sister, let's say, we're both preemies, we go on a date. If it's just me and that sister, we will both get in trouble if the elders find out or if a brother sees us and snitches on us, because there's supposed to be a chaperone with us. Because something could happen if it's just me and the sister. We can't just go out and have a good time on our own. Two consenting adults around the same age, having a good time, not even doing anything sexual. Maybe just a movie. Maybe just a shopping trip. Maybe a meal in a restaurant. No, there has to be a third wheel every time. I'm sure that makes it so romantic for me to try to, hold the hand of my beloved one, my future to be, while there's Steve on the other side of the table or a table or two away, keeping an eye on us with his binoculars while he wears a trench coat. Like, how is that? Is this the right word? Inducive? How does that help a relationship? You don't get to feel comfortable with your loved one knowing that there's a set of eyes on you. And what many people end up doing is they pick a confidant, somebody that's with them, who accompanies them, but somebody who they know doesn't care. It could be a little brother. It could be a brother who is not really all that spiritual. Well, you guys do whatever. I'll be over here. They pick somebody who's loose with the rules, in other words. The chaperone. But, the fact that you have to go through this many loopholes to be in a relationship, not to mention that you're expected to do this courting process, not just go straight to dating, not to get to know a girl. Because if you're getting to know a girl in the beginning and as friends, it's immediately going to be thrust upon you the fact that you two are going to be dating, that it's expected of you. Don't talk to a girl if you're not interested in her, because you could break her heart. So many things to worry about as a witness, so many ideas in your head, and in reality, it's all hogwash. It's just rules made by men who were stuck in the early 1900s, late 1800s, have no grasp on reality, have no idea what it's like to live in the real world, not in their beautiful Warwick building where they have their own rooms, they pay for nothing, they get everything they want, they can go anywhere they go, they can drink whatever they want to drink, buy expensive liquor at the store, they do whatever they want to do. But for you to hold your hand, hold your girlfriend's hand while you eat at a restaurant alone, preposterous. It's just right there, right next to fornication, murder, and then holding your girlfriend's hand. And then right next to that is long sideburns. So we obviously know that God's organization, the Jehovah's Witnesses, they really have their stuff together. This isn't cringy. I take it back. It's actually really informative. This actually shows me that the organization has lost its marbles. And the further away I get from this, the less normalized I view it. Because when you're leaving, like I was some time ago, officially like, oh, I gotta be out, you still cling on to some of these things. But once you distance yourself from these beliefs, they no longer have the grip that they had on you before. You view things normally, you lose that indoctrination, and you actually become a truer, better version of yourself. So I'm ever grateful that I left the Jehovah's Witness organization because I no longer do these things, and I no longer have to cringe at the fact that I can't do these things. And I can finally bask in the glory of having longer than average sideburns. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget, please hit subscribe, hit like, hit the notification bell. Links down below. Videos every Wednesday at 1, and then Stuffed Crust videos every Saturday at 1. Take care. Have a good day.